It looks like we are exactly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 o'clock Western Time and probably 5 o'clock Mountain Time. And somewhere in between, it might even be 6 p.m. But we're going to get started. We want to welcome you tonight to the Zion Benefit Services of the AME Zion Church webinar on retirement planning and risk mitigation. This is going to be really a discussion concerning the markets and retirement planning, particularly around where the markets are right now, how you can save money for retirement, and even try to shift and mitigate risk with regards to all the volatility that's taking place in the marketplace. I am Reverend Darrell Williams, and I do serve as the Executive Director of Zion Benefit Services, and I'm excited to be on this call tonight. I know that many of you are watching from different mediums, and it's also being taped, and so we're looking forward to seeing you take advantage of the information we're going to share tonight. And for the record, I also serve, obviously, I do have a license and securities license, and I'm able to talk about some of the things we're going to discuss tonight. So I'm happy that you're here with us. We praise God for your presence. We also will have later on in the evening series Sister Morgana Jones, who's a wealth strategist and planner, and she's going to be talking about trusts and wills, living wills, and then living trusts for our ministers and persons who belong to the church. She is actually a member of the Shaw AME Zion Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and we've done some things together, and we're slowly bringing her on board to do some workshops and so forth, and therefore she'll be sharing towards the end of this segment on tonight. I do want to thank Darren Kent for this opportunity to do a webinar, as well as thank my staff. We have there in the office, we're there in Charlotte, Sister Althea Stewart, Alexis Parker, and of course, Sister Demarest Baker, who works remote for our offices. And of course, we have even Reverend Dr. McCain, who comes in to volunteer as well. I'm looking at the opportunities that we have throughout the entire organization. However, tonight, we are definitely going to be talking about retirement planning as it surrounds our 403B plan. And whether you know or not, most people do know, we do have a 403B plan, which is very much like a 401k plan at work. And one of the challenges that many people have is that you're figuring out, how to invest, where to put their money, how to mitigate some risk. People are afraid to put monies into the marketplace. So there's ways you can still invest money with consistency in a number of different areas and almost remove any kind of high levels of risk simply because you're willing to take maybe a lower rate of return and therefore mitigate all risk in your overall portfolio. Having said that, we're going to get started. I'm going to share my screen and open up an area. I can get here. We are right here. All righty. There we go. Okay, there we go. And so we're going to talk really retirement risks. And this also share with you that the information provided is not written intended to give you any kind of tax or legal advice. We always give you this disclaimer because it's important to do that. And there's also persons that will be involved in the estate planning process should work with an estate planning team. Ironically, you do have two persons on this call that understands that whole area. When it comes to legal or tax counsel, you want to definitely talk to your attorneys and or your tax accountant to handle those kinds of things as well. As it applies to tonight's conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about some, financial well-being. I'm really not going to spend a lot of time in this area because I want to get to the meat of the matter. But I want basically understanding that it applies to especially pastors and ministers in the AME Zion Church and any other church for that matter. You want to be able to have control over your day-to-day. You know what? Hold on. Let me stop before we get started. I always pray before we do any workshop. So let's have a word of prayer. Gracious God, our Father in heaven, we give you thanks and praise for allowing us to see a brand new day. Thank you, Lord God, for bringing us to this place. Here we are now in June of 2026. Persons are on this call learning about retirement planning, but I also know, Lord, you want us to be good stewards over what you gave us. You also want us to be able to be excited and happy of the way you bless us. So help us to sow properly and sow aggressively so we can reap also, not sparingly, but reap aggressive rewards from you. Bless us night as we go forth, and always say and do that everyone leaves this call with a little more information to become better stewards over how you've blessed us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. And again, thank you, Brother Darren Kent. He's on the call as well, helping us to facilitate this call tonight. But really, think about financial well-being. One of the biggest challenges as pastors and ministers is trying to have a control over day-to-day and month-to-month finances. And that's a huge thing there. But having a capacity to absorb financial shock. And financial shocks have a number of different things that occur in our lives. It could be, just having unexpected bills come up. It could be having a lot of money invested in certain areas in the stock market, et cetera, and the markets shift dramatically. So you want to be able to have the capacity to absorb different kinds of financial shock. Being on track to meet your financial goals obviously is a very important one. And one of the things we're going to see later on is, at what age do you want to meet certain goals? There are many layers of goals. One might be, if you're single, getting married and having kids, and kids going to college and buying a house. Then ultimately retirement. What does that look like for you? If you're married or if you're single, everyone's got their own different goals, and there's no cookie cutter approach. Everyone has their own objective and goals that they need to meet for their own situation. And of course, the last one is really having the financial freedom to make choices that allow us to enjoy life. And we do serve a God who wants us to have an abundant life. That's why Jesus came in the first place. I've come that you might have life and have it to the full. So all this comes into play as Christian workers. We should have really, really attractive financial well-being. Why is addressing retirement risk? Well, first of all, it's critical because unfortunately, Amy Zion Church, we don't have a benevolent fund any longer. I'd like to see us get back to that on some level, but it's not there at this time. So therefore, you need to understand retirement risk is critical. You might put in 20, 30, 40, even 50 years working for the church in the area of as a pastor in particular, or presiding elder for that matter, and understand it's a risk if you don't do some things early on. If you try to play catch up later on, it's doable, but you must understand the risks that are involved if you begin planning later in life. So some things you're going to need to understand. In retirement, one of the things that, most of us kind of know this, but you're going to be living on a fixed income. You're also going to have a finite amount of savings and assets. Usually what you have, that's what you've got to work with as time goes on. But if you keep it growing, that's wonderful. But usually when you retire, it's like you got this much income coming from different sources, and I got this much money in the bank or maybe a rental property, and that's kind of what you have to work with it. So you've got to understand how to make sure you maintain what you have, and particularly looking at inflation as well, a long time. And of course, you have a short time to recover from financial setbacks. One of the challenges we're going to talk about tonight is risk mitigation, because if you have large amounts of money aggressively invested in the market, and we see a major shift or a drop in the markets, plural, and you're ready to retire, you might see your portfolio drop dramatically. It takes time to recover from that. And so these are things we're going to be discussing tonight. Agenda, there's 5 things. I won't cover a lot in the area of healthcare, but we are going to talk about a little bit of longevity, inflation, rate of withdrawal. In other words, how much can you pull out when it's time to retire from your sources of income to make certain you have what's called a sustainable income throughout retirement. This is one of the things that people really don't understand. And I want to make sure we're clear on this area, because you've heard the commercial from ING a number of years ago, and they had this commercial that said, "What's your magical number? What's your number?" And the idea was that, how much money would you have built up for retirement? And that magical number could be 1 million, 500,000, 2 million, whatever the case may be. It just depends. Every situation is different. So the rate of withdrawal, when you've built up a pot of money, how much can you take out per year and sustain those dollars to last you a lifetime? Many people will take out too much, too quickly, too early, and therefore possibly run out of money before they actually retire. Let me say something about rate of withdrawal. The beautiful thing about rate of withdrawal, you have a lot more flexibility if you own your home. In other words, you've bought a home, you paid off the mortgage before you retire, and if that payment's gone, you take a lot of pressure off how much income you need per month to maintain your livelihood or lifestyle. We're going to talk about asset allocation, how to invest your dollars in different areas. Where should you be putting your money? What kinds of mutual funds or what kinds of bond funds, et cetera, so that you've got some balance in your portfolio. The last thing is healthcare. I'm not going to go into detail there, but many people kind of forget, and everyone on this call would know, if you've dealt with anybody in your family, I know I have, I've had 2 or 3 people have to go into assisted living on some level, and it's very expensive. As a matter of fact, strategists are telling us right now that if you go into an assisted living facility on any level at 75 or 80, the cost could be 10 to 12,000 per month based on where you're living. Even if you stay home, have somebody come in, it might be a little less if you live like in different areas in the South. But if you live in the North, Northeast, and the West, you're looking at between 8 and 10,000 per month to have somebody take care of you in your older age. So these are some areas that really matter when it comes to planning for retirement. So longevity. What's longevity risk? What's the possibility of outliving your money? I talked with the minister just recently, not long ago. He is now 85 years old. He's been retired for 18 years. There's a good chance he'll see 95 to 100 years old just because he's still very healthy at 85. What that really means is that if you're going to live, keep living longer and longer and longer, and before we finally meet Jesus in person on the other side, know that we must make certain that we have assets and resources to keep us going financially for that number of years. This scale tells us that men, an average retirement at 65 is 84.3 years old. Okay, and for women, they tend to last 22 years. So they last longer than us. I've never understood exactly, well, I think I probably do understand why. It's because maybe they're just a little bit smarter. I'm not sure. Or we just give up. We're tired. We don't want to deal with it. And women tend to be stronger. I think that's God's way of blessing women because going through childbirth and so forth, it's like, here's a few more years on the back end. Either way you look at it, know that men die sooner and women obviously last a little bit longer, about 3 years longer. What's interesting about longevity risk, know this here. Many people will start taking Social Security early, and it depends on several factors. You got to be very careful about taking Social Security too early, but just know that they are going to start tinkering with Social Security because in 2034, that's what's called the crossover point. That's when the Social Security Administration says that the amount of money that comes into the system will be less than the money goes out of the system. So they'll be pouring more out than what comes in. So before that time, they're going to make adjustments. They're already pushing out the full retirement age even right now. So if someone's looking at retiring or pulling their funds from retirement at 62 or 63 or earlier than the full retirement age, know that if you do that, you're going to be, taking less money. I always tell people to consider the possibility of longevity in your family. If you know that everybody from your mama, your daddy, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles died before age 83, 4, or 5, then taking it a little early might not be a bad idea because last thing you want to do is wait till 70, take a higher amount, and then die at 76 because that's your average life expectancy. So those are the things that you want to be aware of and give some thought to as it applies to longevity risk. And we also know people are living longer anyway because we do have way more medical technology. And my goodness, I can only imagine with AI, what the possibilities are. I mean, so when you think about the AI getting engaged in medical technology, we could be robot walking around half human, half robots, you never know. And what impact will that have on retirement planning if we all of a sudden, if the Lord hadn't returned, how could things look in terms of maintaining our livelihood financially if you continue to live beyond 90, 95 years old? So those are the things that we try to really look at and help people to understand with some degree of certainty. The longer you live, the more you will need to have saved. That's just fact. And I think that, as we're building. So I talked with many ministers who have waited. And then one gentleman said, hey, I'm 66, I've got a little bit here, a little bit there, but I'm going to start putting some money away in the 403B plan because you know what? It doesn't hurt to start saving something somewhere. So if you can put something away, even at 66 years old with a plan of working 3, 4, 5, 6 more years, it does just create another pot of money. The objective, we've got to do better at putting money aside for the purposes of retirement. We'll discuss after-tax, pre-tax, and all that later on in the slide presentation. But know that the longer you live, you just got to have more money saved up. And again, unless you've got no bills and you've got some guaranteed income sources from, be it a pension, be it, Social Security, an annuity contract, you got to have money piled up and paying you an income. Most people want regular monthly checks in retirement. It's hard to have a big chunk of money and then to pull out a little bit when you need it, because then there's a tendency to pull out more than you need because you have more that you're looking at in an account. So I really encourage you, if you've got some money piled up, wherever you have it, the bank, etc., you want to look at the possibilities of turning that into a guaranteed income stream in retirement, one that will last you your entire life. You don't want a 5-year payout or a 10-year payout. You want lifetime payouts. If you live long, you want to make sure your income lives as long as you do. And by the way, at the end of the presentation, please, if you have questions, you may put them in the chat, and Mr. Darren Kent will allow me to answer them, or Morgana, depending upon the nature of the question. Also with longevity, there's some things we can do. Create strategies that provide income for life. I just mentioned that. Contribute more to your retirement account. That's obviously a good thing. And a lot of times, everyone's people are saying, I don't want to put that much money in my retirement account. Well, we need to, because what will happen, even if you die early, guess what? That money goes to your family. And we need to start thinking more about the possibility of, in the event we die early, I still need to build up that bucket of money. So let's get in the habit of putting more into retirement accounts. In terms of how much you put away, it's really up to you. But when I've done consultations with companies and clients, I generally have said, you know what, whatever your income is, 20% should be going into some kind of vehicle. The first 10% is your tithe, amen, somebody. The next 10% is your 401k, 403b, Roth, whatever the case may be. That way, if you're making 100,000 per year, you know that 10,000 is going into your retirement plan. As your income goes up, that amount you put away goes up. Over time, it definitely builds up. I definitely put the word tithing in there because I think as Christians, we need to make sure we're being good stewards over how God has blessed us. It also makes saving easier. Non-tithers can save, but it seems to be not the same level of discipline as tithers. Delaying Social Security. I mentioned this earlier. This is one thing you can do if you're still working. This is for persons who maybe you have a couple different jobs. Maybe you are bivocational and you have a full-time job that pays you a full salary and is funding Social Security. So Social Security is very unique. If you turn it on at 62, you get the lowest amount possible based on your number of years or quarters in income. If you prolong that to 67 right now is FRA or full retirement age, what that means is if you're 67 years old right now, you can continue working and making as much money as you want and also pull your Social Security. However, if you delay taking Social Security, it grows, the income grows by 8% per year up to age 70. That's substantial. So I've seen persons that were getting 3,000 per month at 65, but if they had waited until 70, it was right at $4,000 per month. That's $500 per month extra. So delaying could be worth it. But again, you've got to gauge whether it's worth it based on your longevity, your needs, etc. And of course, the last one here is for longevity, limit how much you pull from your savings during retirement. That's, in other words, making an adjustment. Person says, I've got $1 million saved up in my retirement plan, and I need from that to generate income of at least 30,000 per year to supplement your income. That's only 3%. That's sustainable. But someone says, hey, I've got $1 million piled up in my retirement plans or monies, etc. I need 100,000 per year from that. You can do it, but it might only last you 10 years because you also got to make money while you're pulling money out. And nothing worse than pulling money out of a retirement plan while the markets are down, because that's going to cause you to have your dollars go down or a lot faster than you thought. So longevity is really a huge necessity to consider in retirement planning. Inflation, let's take a look at inflation very briefly. We know what it is. We're paying it right now. Gas costs. There was a time, it wasn't long ago, you couldn't get eggs. And the eggs were expensive. And then steak was expensive and everything was expensive. And even right now, the price of gas, as high as it is, we still get it, but it's a lot more out of our monthly budget. So we've got to be very mindful and careful about what inflation is. It's not so much the inflation risk on one item, it's over time. Because if the average inflation risk rate is at 3 to 4%, I think it's really higher right now. What does that look like in retirement after, when you've got a fixed income? And this is where it becomes, because you start losing purchasing power or buying power. Initially, when you retire, you've got so much money coming in. You can buy your groceries and pay for your gas and do all the things you want to do and travel. But 10, 12, 15 years from now, with inflation, $100 might only be worth $80 or $82. Therefore, you're losing buying power. So therefore, you want to make certain that when you deal with financial planning and retirement planning, you want to make certain that you build in some layers of inflation. I like 3 or 4%. I think it's a safe number. In other words, always factor in 10 years or 15 years from now, have a 3% inflation rate. How much money should your dollars be growing to keep up with inflation? And we always want to talk about that in some detail. Inflation can really hurt us if we aren't careful. I just mentioned this a minute ago, but at 55 years old, $1,000 buys $1,000 worth of stuff. But that same $1,000 by age 85, it's all of a sudden it buys around $400 worth of stuff. That's serious. And oftentimes when you see that, you think, my goodness, I have less needs at 85. Yeah, but you still need PG&E and gas and electric bill and food. So we try to factor in inflation so that you kind of are planning for that down the road. Inflation also, a lot of strategies help you keep your investments keep pace with current inflation rate. This is an area I like to talk about on a one-on-one basis, but I'll mention to all of us here tonight that I think that when we consider a strategy to help our investments keep pace with inflation, oftentimes someone who is close to retirement or already retired, if inflation is 3 or 4%, just make certain that you have your dollars invested in such a way that it's earning more than inflation. That's a wonderful thing. So, if, in other words, if inflation is at 3 or 4%, but every year your portfolio is growing by 5 or 6%, you're ahead of the ballgame. You're really ahead of inflation, which gives you a very comfortable way of saying, okay, I know my dollars will be there long term. Obviously, we'd love to make 8, 9, 10, or 11 or 12% on our money, even in retirement. But the danger of trying to make high rate of return is that one bad year, 2 bad years, you can see your overall balance come down. So a strategy would be make certain that you have your dollars invested to earn in retirement, a rate of return greater than inflation, whatever the inflation rate might be at that point in time. That also has a lot to do with cost of living adjustments. Sometimes you can investigate certain types of annuity products will give you what's called a cost of living adjustment built in. So if you have an income annuity that's paying you a monthly amount for life, you can actually buy a rider that will give you an increase in pay every 3 to 5 years that will step up your income later on. And you can buy those annuity contracts with either your IRA money or your 401k money to ensure you have a guaranteed plan that's going to give you guaranteed income throughout all of your retirement years. And if you're smart, you can structure them in such a way to where you pass away early, the money left in there goes to your family and your heirs. And that's very important. We've seen many pension plans out there. A person just says, I want the most I can get from my company pension, and they take the lifetime payout, die in 1 month, all that money stays with the company. So you always want to structure it where you make certain that if you die earlier than pulling out all your money over the years of a long life, that what's left in there goes to your family. And of course, the third idea might be reduce your spending, especially in areas that may be affected by inflation. I always tell clients, if you're going to buy a new car, maybe you buy it right before you retire, just because you want to make sure you have while you've got a higher income and pay that car off before actually getting into your heavier retirement years. And that's the picture of inflation. I want to get to some investment stuff now. Rate of withdrawal. What is the withdrawal rate? Basically, you want to be able to take the right amount of money per month out of your retirement plan portfolio that will sustain you for a long time. And here it says, what is rate of withdrawal risk? Is it an unsupportable rate of withdrawal or compounding issues associated with poor market returns? Both of these matter. The market will always outperform most fixed instruments, but there's always going to be a bad year or two that is built in there. That's the volatility of the markets. We're seeing a lot of volatility even right now. One day it's up, one day it's down. It's all over the map sometimes, but over time, I know that the markets will always give you rates of returns over time because they're designed to do just that. So you got to be very careful with taking out the proper amount of money out of your overall plans over time. This shows you withdrawing too much from savings can leave you with a limited funds later in life. So a person takes out a certain amount of money, they've got $250,000 available at age 67. They say, oh, I've got all this money piled up. It's in my IRAs and my 403b plan with Zion Benefit Services, with Envoy, and I'm going to take out $20,000 per year. I mentioned this earlier with the $100,000 example, but $20,000 per year, that's taking out 8%. And it could also, you could run out of this money very quickly because based upon the markets, if the markets are up or down, 1 or 2 bad years in the markets throughout here, and you can run out of that pocket of money, it'll be gone by 79. Taking out a little less, it'll last you a little longer. And of course, taking out even less than that, it goes all the way up to 92. So that's one of the things you want to think about with a rate of withdrawal return. This is something that's called the effect of sequence of returns on your savings account overall. So hypothetically speaking, if a person had a balance of $500,000 at age 65 and then left it in the market, it shows you what happens if timing's everything. That first year, the person's taking out $20,000 per year. or a percent, I'm sorry, taking out a percentage, a 4% withdrawal rate beginning at the first year. First year, obviously the markets lost a lot of money. He took out his 20, or she took out his 20, her 20, but the balance went down dramatically. Next year, markets came back up. They took out their annual withdrawal. Their balance has gone down. You can see what happens over here. Some bad markets happen in the middle of the ages of 71, 2, 3, 4. Negative returns while you're still taking out income, your balance begins to go back down. Oh, a great year pops up in there because this is an example where no one changed anything. This is the S&P 500, left your money right in there, which is fine to do. But the problem is you're really seeing your portfolio drop in bad years. There's no downside protection. And this is where we start talking about mitigating risk. In this example, you saw a person that retired at 66 or 65 years old with $500,000. They pulled out a decent amount of money, but they ran out of money in this particular portfolio right at age 89. Imagine something reverse. All of a sudden, you have a different sequence of returns. In other words, the same 500,000, but the first couple of years you had a positive market performance, and so the markets are up. You total out your 20,000. Your balance is up. Next year, markets are up. You pull out your 20,006, and we put an inflation rider in there. Your balance is up. Next year, down market, but you're well ahead of the ball game. So you have all of these positive years in the market, but it started off on a positive note, where this one here had a lot of negative years out the gate. And that's the nature of sequence of returns. The S&P 500, by the way, is a list of securities used as a measure of U.S. stock market performance. And I do a lot in that area of planning. But the important thing is understanding when you take money out on a regular basis, just keep an eyeball on the performance history and how much you're making on your dollars in that overall portfolio. Some ideas that you can do, we mentioned this earlier, limit your withdrawals from savings in years when there's a bad market. So if markets are down, don't take as much from that account. You want to have other places to pull money from, because if it's a down market, the last thing you want to do is pull money out and have your portfolio go down. So limit your withdrawals from your investment account. Seek investments that limit the impact of negative returns. In other words, have monies in different areas, bonds, fixed rate of return. So there's things you can do from an investment standpoint to avoid having too much money in the volatility of just the stock market. And this is an important area to give some thought to. And third, have additional sources of predictable income, so you can rely less on withdrawals to cover regular expenses. All those things will help. And Social Security is really a huge one. Asset allocation. How's our time? We are looking good. Asset allocation, I love talking about this because basically it's an unbalanced investment portfolio that can offer or suffer negative effects of downturns. So the key is having money in different areas. This example here shows you, well, if you had money in a mutual fund that had a blend of bonds, some cash, some stocks, that means you have multiple different portfolios. You have some equities in here, some bonds, some cash. It's a very moderate asset allocation. In other words, if it were all in equities, you take a lot more risk. You can make a lot more money quickly, but would drop. So the goal is to have a good blend. The funds that are available within Envoy, in particular the basic plan, the 403B plan, that's the basic fund. They have the Envoy as a target date fund, Envoy target date 35 fund. That fund is very balanced and people who are in that fund have loved it. We've seen returns between 7 and 9% rate of return consistently over the last 8 to 10 years. And so our portfolio as a whole, for our ministers, yes, many of you on this call have seen great returns consistently in that particular portfolio. And what's amazing is that when you think about it, you haven't had really any negative years in the last 3 to 5 years, because when the equities are down, bonds and cash tend to be up a little bit. So it's a nice balancing act. You won't see a huge growth of a 15% in 1 year, but if you can make 7, 8, 9% every year over time, you're going to be doing quite well, because you're really taking some of the risk out of your portfolio. In terms of asset allocation, make sure you have different investments. And again, when you sign up for the 403B plan, feel free to call me at the office there in Charlotte. I'd be happy to go over it with you. And or call Envoy directly. They can also walk through some of the performance histories with you. But if you're in the basic plan, 90% of our enrollees are in the basic plan, the Envoy 2035 target date fund. There's multiple target date funds, but those are the most balanced ones, and they have some funds inside of those portfolios that really kind of protect you from going, too far on the upside and definitely too far on the downside. Healthcare. There's two main types of healthcare risk. There's acute, there's chronic. They both can be very expensive. Chronic healthcare conditions can vary. Stroke, injury, dementia, Alzheimer's. And I know for ministers, you want to make certain that you do something to plan for, my goodness, what if? Yes, kids and grandkids might take care of us, but know that Medicare does not pay for long-term care or skilled nursing facilities. They will pay a portion for a number of days, but after that, unless you have zero assets, you're pretty much on your own. So just know, make healthcare a part of your planning for retirement. Someone said that the overall cost of retirement for somebody that goes into a facility could be between $250,000 and $300,000, because if you're in a facility or someone's to come in and take care of you and it's for 3 or 4 years, you can kind of do the math on what it would cost to take care of you over time. That's the cost of chronic health care risk. Also, the needs I mentioned earlier. What's it cost to go into a facility? You're looking at almost $10,000 of a nursing home cost. Again, depending on where you're, a semi-private room. The national median is $6,400 per year, or per month, I'm sorry. It's a monthly cost. The national assisted living, $6,000. And again, based on where you're located. So if you're, like I said, New York or Florida, it's a lot more expensive. Versus if you're in Mississippi, Arkansas, some of the southern states, a lot less expensive. California averages between $7,000 to $8,000 per month. Again, if you want a decent place to be in. So healthcare is really that back end time. And you can have high quality of living, by the way, in an assisted living facility. So you want to make sure you plan for what this might cost in terms of in your retirement planning schedule. There's some areas here regarding healthcare. I'm not going to cover this in detail, but know that you can get long-term care insurance. There's things you can do to plan for the healthcare costs you can face later on. Now, let me spend a moment just talking about the asset allocation piece and the multiple things where your dollars can come from. Oh, let me go back here. Okay, because I think that our retirement dollars come from different sources of income, and know that the more you put into your 403B plan, it can be pre-tax, it can be after tax. So when you go online and pull up the Envoy portion of in our website, of ZBS website, know that you have the option, if you are a W-2 employee of the church. Let me say it again, a W-2 employee of the church. If you're doing that, then you have the ability to put money in pre-tax, and you can choose multiple investments. Again, if you do that, you want to give Envoy a call. If you have questions in detail, give me a call directly at the offices in Charlotte. However, if you do not get a W-2 and your church is simply making contributions on your behalf as a minister, then generally speaking, it will be an after-tax type fund. Money can go in, they can send in a check. We have a number of churches that send a check directly to our office on behalf of the pastor, and then it comes to our office, and we send it right off directly to Envoy and to the investments you've chosen. But understand this, when it comes to the retirement plan, the 403B plan, it allows you that money will follow you. So the pastor, if you leave your current church because annual conference was great or not great because you didn't go back or you did go back, well, know that your money follows your Social Security number. So if you get transferred from one church to another and they keep making contributions for you, those are your funds. When you set it up through your Social Security number. If you pass away early, God forbid, those monies go to your named beneficiary, and they cannot be attacked by creditors. So just know that and maintain that in the back of your mind as it applies to putting monies aside. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and get back on the screen here. We've covered a lot in this area. The goal was to kind of give you just a real good overview as you're thinking about how to put monies away for retirement. And the idea is that we would be able to give you a roadmap to follow. The 403B9 plan we have available through the Amy Zion Church, it's 403B9 for a reason. You've heard of 403B plans because those are, generally speaking, retirement plans, employer-sponsored plans for nonprofits. The 403, the B9 portion is allows for ministers to have some tax favor withdrawal privileges on the back end. In other words, when you retire, a lot of times you build up a large amount of money, well, of which a good portion of that could be earnings or interest that you've earned or investment earnings. Well, you have some tax relief on how you pull funds out on the back end. That's why you have what's called a 403(b)(9) plan versus just a 403(b) plan. Very similar to the 401(k) plan at your corporate jobs. All right. And so we've got the right plan in place. It has grown dramatically over the last year, and more people are enrolling in it. And we're here simply to help support you in that context. Did any questions come up by chance in the chat? I don't see any down here. So we're going to shift gears right now. And if you do have questions, I ask that you please get them over to Mr. Darren Kent over at the Amazon website, and he will get them to us to answer for tonight's call. Right now, it is 4:30 or 7:36 p.m. And for the next 10 minutes, we've asked Ms. Morgana Jones, who is a wealth strategist, and she's done a few things along with me, and we're kind of asking her to take part in some of our workshops, to be available to discuss areas in the area of some areas of planning. But tonight in particular, I've asked her to share some slides in the area of wills and trusts, primarily because many people are dying and making the mistake of not thinking beyond the grave and then having family fight over kind of what's there. And we don't want that to happen any longer to our people. We need to close this wealth gap between races. And one of the ways to do it is to plan as it applies to trusts and wills. So, Ms. Morgana Jones, you have the spotlight.
Thank you so much, Reverend Williams. Hello, Amy Zion. I am pleased to speak with you today and a topic that's actually near and dear to my heart. I'm going to try not to get emotional. Until you have dealt with someone passing, you're not really prepared for what that process is like. With the time I have with you today, I just want to tell you what the probate process is like, and not so much from an educational standpoint. I'm just going to share a story with you. But it's near and dear to my heart because we lost my grandmother right in 2022 when COVID hit. Thankfully, it was before they stopped letting you go through and see her, but I was able to see her. What's hurtful is, even though I was in this business, I wasn't in the business early enough to help prepare my grandmother. The house that my grandfather built and her brother built with their own hands, we lost. We weren't ready for her need for Medicare, or I'm going to say long-term care, right? So we found out the hard way exactly what probate is. But I'm going to step back. And then she even had life insurance. She was wise enough to have life insurance. And do you know, they kept every penny of her life insurance. So sometimes you can plan and have the right things in your portfolio, like life insurance, but you miss something like a will and your family has to go through probate. So whether you're a male or female on the call, we're just going to use the name Alex. And Alex is someone who owns a home, participates in the 403(b) that the church offers, has a checking account, investments, even is aware of and leverages the $10,000 of life insurance that you get for lifetime after a certain amount of time. But Reverend Williams can share those details with you. Of course, has children, and we often want better for our children than we want for ourselves. So let's see if Alex accomplished that. And then Alex, of course, wants to leave a legacy. We all want our children to have a better life than we do. Now, Alex, healthy, but was taken before expected. And that's one thing that we can't plan, and that is our passing. So what happened? After Alex passed, the family was sad. They didn't know what to do. They look for the will. They couldn't find the will. So they searched file cabinets, desk drawers, they searched under the mattress for all places, email accounts, safe boxes, but they couldn't find the will. Now, without the will, that holds up the process. So now the funeral hasn't happened yet. They don't have the will, so they can't get to the life insurance to pay for the funeral. But yet and still, families calling, people are calling. When is the funeral? What are you going to do? And as much as they would like to let them know, they can't because they cannot get a hold to the life insurance. So eventually, the will is found. But now what happens? They have to deal with the court. They thought maybe everything was prepared, but they found out there were bills that were unpaid, the bank accounts. She can't even get into the bank accounts because there are no passwords. If you pass right now, can your family get to your bank account to get whatever funds are available? Do they have the access? Bills are still due. Many people are struggling to pay the day-to-day on their own, then lose an income and still have bills facing when you're in grief is very stressful. Mortgages due, utilities are due. The bills keep coming, but they still don't have access to the money. Life keeps going, and now they have to file a petition with the court. Now, this is when it gets fun. Alex told child A that they can have this, and cousin Tina that they can have this. And they want the funds, but they still cannot get to the funds. And then there's conflict on who gets what because they can't find the will. Now, here's what comes up next. They have to notify the creditors. Do you know that if your estate goes through probate, even if you want your family, even if you built a nest egg for your family, they cannot get to it first. All of your creditors are made aware that you've passed. They have an opportunity to get what is owed. And there is some debt that continues on even after your passing. Okay, so now we've notified the creditors. They thought maybe Alex had, what, $500,000 in his estate. But after the creditors were paid, after the attorneys were paid, I wonder how much was really left. Not what Alex was expecting. So now we have to take a look at the assets, retirement accounts, life insurance. But guess what? They can't even find those documents. We talked about the bank account, but the big documents, the life insurance documents, the beneficiary paperwork. So there's still no money for the family. And how much time has passed by now? More confusion, more frustration. This has been resolved, and now it's time to pay debt. We thought we were getting more because we didn't have the will. We have to pay the court. We have to pay attorney fees. There are still the outstanding debts. There are the administrative expenses. There's taxes. And again, what the family thought they were going to get, they're not getting. Can you imagine the frustration? Can you imagine the person who is responsible for this, the executor, the stress that they're dealing with, trying to disperse the money, trying to take care of the family? And I wonder if the funeral has even occurred at this point. Because at sometimes it takes months to resolve probate. So now step 9, they distribute the assets to the beneficiaries. No one's happy because no one's getting what they thought they would get in many cases. And now they close the estate. There's paperwork that has to still be taken care of. There's still turmoil in the family. Are you keeping that house? Did, oh, story, true story. I have a client who husband passed, and come to find out the beneficiary wasn't updated on the life insurance. So, guess who was still a beneficiary on the life insurance? His first wife. So that's why it's important also to update your beneficiaries regularly. So we talk about trust, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But if we can't get through the probate process, how do we even get to a need for a trust? So my position to you is have a will. I can offer you a will today, and I'll share with you a free resource. Have a will so that your family knows who should receive your assets, who should manage your affairs, who should care for minor children. Now, there's one aspect of a will that we don't always consider, and that is not so much what happens when we pass, but what if we get sick and we can't take care of ourselves? Who do we want to make decisions for us? That is a significant part of a will called an advance directive that everyone should have. We like to think, that people will take care of us the way we want them to. And we hope that's the case, but have a decision in who takes care of you so you know at least the person you trust will look after you. And if you have children, look after your children. So, speaking of trust, why would you need a trust? My grandmother, if I were in this business earlier, we would have had an irrevocable living trust for her or a Medicaid trust. So many of us culturally aren't prepared for retirement, right? So if we're not prepared for retirement, how are we leaving a legacy for our family? And if you're not prepared for retirement, how are you going to be prepared for long-term care and the expenses that Reverend William mentioned earlier? But with planning, if you know you don't have those resources, or if you think you may not have the resources, that Medicaid trust will allow you to put your assets in the name of someone you trust, a responsible child or family member or dear friend, so that when long-term care comes, because to me, in my opinion, it's not a matter of if, but when, you could at least have a good Medicaid program. Like my grandmother, thankfully in New Jersey, they have good Medicaid. We were in a small town, so I was able to know who was caring for my grandmother, people that I went to school with. But not every state has good Medicaid. So if your assets are growing slower, if you started late, or if you did everything right but had a setback, look into a Medicaid trust so that you could at least qualify for Medicaid. I have a business partner whose mother missed the qualification of Medicaid by $10. $10. As a result, she didn't have the Medicaid system that we have in New Jersey. She was moved around 3 or 4 times in a matter of 2 years. So, my ask of you is not just to listen to the information, but to take action. Not only with the free will, you'll have my contact information on the next slide. Look into a trust, consult with an attorney, an estate planning attorney. I have several in my network, and I'm sure Reverend Williams does as well. But one thing that you can do that costs absolutely nothing is organize your information. Again, if you pass today, can they get to your account? Whether it's a bank account, a utility account, a password account, you might need pictures for the funeral, something very practical. And everything nowadays is mostly on social media. Can you get to the account? So, what I would like to provide to you is a free will at no cost so that you can get your affairs in order. We want you to be able to leave your family with clarity so they know who to contact, where the essential information is. We want you to leave your family with confidence, especially if you're the breadwinner, knowing that if you pass, they have something to fall back on. And it could be as simple as avoiding the probate process so that whatever you saved, your family gets first. I can also offer you a free legacy plan. I call it a legacy financial plan, but it's just really a place to organize all of your essential documents, whether it's tax forms, whether it's stories or pictures. You have the knowledge. My hope is that you will take the action so that you can leave your family a legacy and peace of mind. Back to you, Reverend Williams.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Morgana. This has been very fruitful and very helpful. You can stop sharing. There we go. You're back in front. And I hope that those of you who are on the call and those who will be watching the live webinar, because this is going to be on our website, you can watch it again over and over. But the information here is for you. Miss Jones, really, she's slowly becoming a partner of ours, and we're going to be able to maximize her professionalism and bring her more to the light of working with our churches and our ministers as we unfold more opportunities for our pastors. I didn't see any questions come up inside the chat. Dr. Kent, if he's still on the call, I think he might be. Any questions pop up at all? And if not,
No, we didn't have any questions, sir.
no worries. That means we did an amazing job presenting the information, but keep an eye open for what's next. My goal was to have one of these back in actually May, and here we are in June. And at least once a quarter is to do some kind of educational seminar be in tune to what we have coming up next for you. We will be present at Connectional Council, as well as at the Christian Education Convention. I know that Morgana will be at the convention as well, with the booth and table there offering her services. But we thank you for your presence tonight, and we're not going to belabor your evening. We're going to give you back a little bit of time so you can get to your Monday night and watch probably nothing on TV, because there's nothing worth watching, because the NBA is over. The Knicks have won, and now we're getting ready to watch baseball and maybe
Go New York, go New York.
Go Knicks,
Yes.
go Knicks. All right, we're happy for them as well. God bless you all. Thank you for joining us tonight, and keep this in mind. Only what you do for Christ will last. But if you run for him, he'll give you some things and resources that will last a lifetime. Have a great night. Take care. God bless. Thank you again.
God bless.